we were out with Exciter, and it was their agents, and some of the shows weren't confirmed. They would cancel. We were literally sitting in Kansas City, and some girls bought us like a hibachi, and we were buying some beer, and we were literally making hamburgers in the parking lot, staying at the Motel 6. And I remember me and Dave called Combat and said, listen, we're dying out here. We need some money. And all they said was, you guys need to go home and get jobs. Fuck you.
The David Ellefson Show, featuring Grammy Award winner David Ellefson and respected metal journalist Joshua Toomey.
I was thinking of a time that a fan had given me a studded bracelet, and so I always kept it on my left hand, my fretting hand. Yeah. And then one day I was like, you know what? I'm going to wear it on this arm for no real reason. Right before the show, I put it on, and I put it on this hand. First note, it catches on my E string, breaks my string,
Total. It's funny, man. I'll even have things like that, like just some little decorative bracelet, which if you're just hanging out, is fine. Just even something super small. But the clasp on it will for sure get caught on something, right? Or it's uncomfortable. Yeah. I mean, that's why, years ago, we, in Megadeth, we just started wearing, sweatbands, which I guess we probably took that from Steve Harris, because he had that. And that kind of became part of the thrash metal uniform. He's wearing a wristband, like, a split band, rather than like some big gaudy, cool looking, that's why, like when remember going over to Kerry King's house when we were building our stage in his backyard back in 1984. And I walk into the house and his dad's sitting there reading the paper. His mom's like knitting something and the TV's on, and Kerry's on the floor, like making the pentagram. Either be the belt. But I think what it was was the nail band with all the
his old wristband.
But he wore that on this hand.
Yeah.
Because then I went to an Army surplus store and found those 90 caliber. I think there were 90 caliber bullets that I had. There's some pictures of them back in the day. And I wore them on this hand. And oh my God, so with a BC Rich, which is already long enough, I've got that on there trying to play and shred and play Bad Omen and Go Beneath the Skin and all this stuff. I lasted, I think I wore it through the Killing Is My Business tour.
Hey everybody, David Ellefson here. Hey, looking forward to seeing you on the upcoming Bass Warrior Tour across Europe. I will be performing some classics and some standards that you will all know, as well as some of the stuff off of my solo records over the years, and Sleeping Giants, cover, maybe even dip back and listen to F5 and some cool stuff like that. So the Bass Warrior dates are posted online along with the stage used bass packages. I play it, hand it to you, it's yours. Take home a piece of thrash history from the night. And we will have Bass Warrior coffee. We'll also have merch, CDs, all kinds of other cool stuff. So come on out, it should be a fun night out. The dates are posted, but I'll read them for you here as well. We're going to kick off. These are all in March, by the way. So on March 6th, we start in Rome, Italy. The 7th will be in Trofarello, Italy. And then we move up into France to the Champs-Élysées in Delvigno, which is actually sold out. And that's on March 8th. Then we're over to Mannheim, Germany on the 9th. We're up in Flensburg, north of Hamburg, on the 12th, Reichenbach on the 13th, and then we're over to Dolmecko, Poland on the 14th, Belden, Australia on the 15th. We were then up to Vienna, Austria on the 18th, Bochnia, Poland on the 20th, Rubov, Czech Republic. Hopefully I'm saying things right. Pardon my Czech. That's going to be on the 20th. We are again in the Czech Republic in Svadobarice, the Kino Club on the 22nd. Voruki in Slovakia on the 23rd. And we'll be finishing on the 29th in Cremona, Italy at the Music Factory Live. So those are the dates. Come and check it out. We look forward to seeing you there on Bass Warrior 2025.
You know what's funny is, in the interview where we're showing basses and stuff, that Schecter that I have is it got a real thick neck, and so when I'm trying to play stuff, it was always like so hard to like overcome the bass. And then I got this Thunderbird, and it's a thin neck, real small. And I'm like, I've wasted so much time like just fighting a bass, and then I get this thing, and I'm like, oh, okay, it's a thinner neck, and easier to manipulate.
When we were starting Megadeth, we were buying stuff out of the recycler, and because on the back of Merciful Fate, I don't know, I forgot if it was Melissa or Don't Break the Oath, Timmy Grabber Hansen, right? Tim Hansen, he had a flying V bass. So I bought a Gibson flying V bass, which was a medium scale length, and then I put some really light strings on it. And a flying V bass isn't going to have a lot of girth and a lot of nuts to it anyway, right? Because most of the wood is missing, right? Because it's been cut out. So it didn't have a lot of bottom end. In fact, I had a tech years ago where I was saying, points, are shapes. It's all about shapes in heavy metal. And he said to me, he goes, yeah, but tone comes from curves. And I was like, so like Les Pauls and Fenders, it's the curve of the body, because there's a lot of meat on the bone, right? There's a lot of wood there, and that's what creates that resonance. So the Flying V didn't cut it was a great neck though. In fact, I saw some video Metallica did where they were all like in COVID or something, and I remember Robert Trujillo was playing one in his house.
Hey everybody, David Ellefson here. Hey, I want to invite you over to my Patreon community. For $8 a month, you will get exclusive content and also episodes of the David Ellefson Show podcast. You will get them a week early before anybody else gets a chance to see them. We're going to have some exclusive content over there, plus also some chats that you'll be able to be a part of. So this is all about us connecting, being part of it. So thank you for following me on my journey, my music career, and everything that I do. Is a great way to stay up to date and up to speed and stay connected with everything in rock and roll that I do. All right, so join me on Patreon. Head on over, sign up, and I will see you there.
It's funny. I don't know when this episode comes out in relation to everything else, but the way that I met Chris Kael was my old band was, I had booked some regional tour when I was 18. Just kind of around the area, and one of the shows we jumped on, his band would have played after my band, and we were going to be the first band of the night. And I set my bass up, tuned it up or whatever, and I leaned it up against my amp, and I walked away, and the guy miking everything knocked my bass over, headstock broke off. It's the very first tour I've ever done, so I've only got the one bass, so I have no bass. Yeah. So I go around asking like the other bands, I'm like, hey, can I borrow your bass? The sound guy just broke it. And Chris Kael handed me a BC Rich Warlock. And it was the most ridiculous thing I'd ever played in my life. And it was weighted. So like anytime, if you let go of it, it just headstock immediately. Right. Yeah. That's how I met Chris. That was like 97, 98. Yeah. So yeah,
at least he was a pro, man. He loaned you his bass. Not a lot of people would do that. That was cool.
Yeah. No, he was a good dude for that band. But yeah, I've got some photos of that or videos of it or whatever. And I'm obviously playing new metal, dreadlocks, big baggy pants on, blah blah blah, and a BC Rich Warlock. It looked ridiculous.
two genres melded together.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Well, as we recorded, man, the passing of Dave Jerden, obviously a big engineer, producer, all this stuff in the business, man, and he's got a funny rest in peace story that I think you were going to elaborate on.
I just learned about that actually, and so I guess he passed a few days ago. And yeah, so it's funny. Mike Klink. Okay, so our manager Ron Lafede worked for a company called Lippman and Kahane, right? And Ron was always his own manager, but he went in under their umbrella, basically, right? So Rob Kahane managed George Michael, who was at the top of his game with the Faith album. Him and Michael Jackson and Madonna basically ruled the earth. The Lippmans, they managed producers. And one of their clients was Mike Klink. So that was how we were able to get Mike Klink to produce the Rest in Peace album. Well, what we didn't know, and I don't think we were ever told this, was that Mike was kind of just there on loan until Axl Rose might call and want to start recording, which would become Use Your Illusion 1 and 2. So we go into the studio, and And Marty tells this story very well, actually, a lot of this stuff in his new memoir, Dreaming Japanese, by the way. Very good book, very well written, very great recollection of facts and things, how things really went down. So definitely check his book out. It's great. And so we go out to Canoga Park to start recording, and at Rumble Recorders, that's where Mike did. He did the Guns and Appetite for Destruction, the acoustic EP, I think, all that stuff out there. So, or that album, and it was actually the Captain and Tennille's studio, right? Robert Dragon or Daryl Dragon, right? That was his name. So, which, for us, my age, they were all over TV, like Donnie and Marie Osmond, Sonny and Cher, Captain and Tennille, they were huge pop stars and TV stars. So this was his studio. So we go out there, we basically me and Nick cut the bass and drum tracks, which took a week to record drums. Klink made us all leave the studio for a week so he could edit it all together, because he was literally cutting the 2-inch 24-track analog tape, for edits and things, and putting it together. Then I came in, I played bass for a week. So, at this point, we're almost a month in, right? And Marty's there, and, just practicing rhythms and starting to kind of start working on solos. Marty played some rhythms on the record. Most of it's Dave. And then it came time for solos, right? Because the material was already written by the time Marty joined the band. So he was just kind of, getting caught up on everything. And so we turned a corner into month 2, and Axel calls Mike Klink and says, "Hey, I'm ready to get going." So Mike Klink has to leave the session. So we started going, "Oh, shit. What are we going to do?" Now, there was an engineer there named Mikasia Ryan, who was an incredible engineer, and he ended up finishing the record. Dave enjoyed working with him for the vocals and the guitars. So, but during the handoff, one of the contenders was Dave Jerden. So Dave came in, cool guy, and I got to know him much better after that, actually, because he was getting sober. We were all getting cleaned up. It was kind of that era, right? I remember he was just a very different type of producer, so he would then go on. I mean, he did Jane's Addiction. He worked with, did Alice in Chains. So in that genre, those bands, incredible. But for us, what things were, our saying was, if, on time is late, on time, being early is on time, being on time is late, right?
Yeah.
We eventually used that lyric in the song Bloody Heroes, on the Euthanasia record. And so Jerden's there, and I remember we asked him a couple questions, or maybe he even sat there for a little bit. We did a couple of takes, and we just realized just the wrong tempo. You know what I mean? Just much slower, much better for grunge, and this kind of like sort of chill, groovy music. And but that was just a brief moment in the studio with him, even though he wasn't, it wasn't the right chemistry for what, again, and by this point, Rust in Peace is midstream. We're like fucking half done, and we're kicking ass, and we're ready to, we had about a month to finish all the overdubs with vocals and guitars. It was a lot, So it didn't work out. Dave ended up continuing with Mikasia Ryan, but I like Dave. Dave Jerden was a cool guy. I'd see him at the gym. We became like friends at the gym over in Burbank, hanging out, And as like a lot of people kind of came through the Megadeth turnstile, either in the band, in the crew, in the management, I was always a guy that kind of remained friends with people, and I was kind of the mayor of the town, and like it's a bass player thing, right? You're probably
right. Yeah, we're just friendly. So I guess the story I read today with Dave Jerden was when he was fired. I guess Mustaine said, "There's too many Daves, so you got to go." Like that was his reason.
Look, best I remember, I don't know that he was ever really hired. I think he was sort of auditioned. Hey, come in, hang, get to know the guys, chill. Let's see if this is a vibe. I don't know that he was actually hired, but typical Dave. He is, a funny, a funny whimsical thing to say, but yeah, it just, he wasn't. It's not like we were 3 weeks into the session and he was fired or something. Yeah. So I don't even know that he was technically hired. So he technically wasn't fired. But but it was interesting because then we ended up getting Max Norman to mix the record, and so and then I've remained dear friends with Mike Klink, who's fantastic and really a great dude, and had a lot of fun on the session. Again, I put that really more on management. They never told us, hey, by the way, Klink's available until the phone rings from Guns N' Roses. We didn't know that.
Do you think you would have went with Mike Klink if you would have known that, though? Maybe they didn't want you to know, because if there was the possibility of him not doing it, then maybe you'd be like, well, we'll just find somebody that will make sure it's still
for sure. I'm pretty sure that's how it was played, because look, Mike Klink, Mike was the right tempo because he was very chill. He was very calm. He would kind of just sort of nod his head. He was sort of, again, the songs were written, so Mike didn't have to come in and really be sort of a musical producer in the sense of arranging parts or, hey, let's work on these harmonies, or, he didn't have to get really engaged in that. He was really more of an engineer. And of course, making the executive decision, that take is great. Hey, let's do another one. Those kind of things. But, Mike had a very relaxed feel, which I think probably around us all coming, me and Dave, especially coming out of our drug days into a sober day. Nick, having been in the band now for about, coming up on about a year, because he joined in the spring of 1989. So he'd been in the group about a year. He kind of knew where all the bombs lay and in the room, and Marty coming in, like he talks about his book, just glad to be in a band, glad finally he's got a salary. He's started, he's finally, kind of came in from the cold, as a starving musician, if you will, and glad to be there. And so he's just kind of suiting up, showing up, shutting up, and just kind of like, let me just play my parts. I want to stay out all the rest of the trauma, So, so I think Clint had the right temperament, for that, for sure. And, the only recordings we did with him, obviously, and he had an incredible synergy with Guns N' Roses. And, here's the funny thing. At the time we were recording Rest in Peace, one time I looked down the hallway, and in so we were in the big room cutting the drums and bass we did there. And then we moved to the smaller room where other sessions were coming in and out of there. And I looked at one point, remember Michael Landau was in there recording, and Michael was like a Steve Lukather, Dan Huff, he was one of the guys called.
Right.
And another time I looked down the hall, and there's this kind of heavier set guy dressed in all white with big white kind of cotton ball hair, right? And I'm like, I don't know who it is. I don't really get to know anybody there. I would find out a few years later that was my cousin. And that guy was Roy Thomas Baker. And he was producing my cousin's band, who I had not even met yet. And she lived out in Southern California. And she had a band called East of Eden, signed to Capitol Records, of all things, like we were.
I know that name. Yeah, that name sounds real cool.
Yeah, they did a record. It was actually pretty cool. It was a vibey, kind of in the Concrete Blonde. It was vibey and cool. Not quite Alanis Morissette, but something like that. And I guess they did one record, and as she said, Roy Thomas Baker had extravagant catering services, and we ate lobster and spent all the money on the budget, and then the record tanked and we got dropped, and that was it. So it was like, welcome to the big ways, Yeah. So how funny is that my cousin was literally recording, my unbeknownst cousin was recording down the hallway while we were doing Rust in Peace.
Well, that's like Phil Dimmel and Troy Lucetta are cousins, but they don't really know each other. Like they didn't meet each other until like way later in life. It's crazy.
Isn't that a funny story? I remember hearing that too. I'm like, Phil would be like, yeah, Troy's my cousin. What? I mean, they get kind of under his breath. They're like, and I love Troy, man. Troy, he bought a house right down the street from me. Then my friend Randy ended up buying from him, but that's that house. He moved down here from the Bay Area, Sacramento, I guess, where Tesla was from. And he moved all of his recording equipment down there because he had a studio. In fact, he recorded some Montrose records. And, those Tesla guys, especially Frank Hannon, they love Montrose, like Ron, I guess maybe did he produce or work on some early Tesla stuff with those guys? And so Frank Hannon, those guys they hail and honor the great, mighty Ronnie Montrose.
Yeah, it's funny. My cousin, I think he's one of my only family members that saw me in Primer, because he was in Tempe, Arizona, going to college for like art, and he just showed up at a show, and I'm like, what the hell? It's like, I'm like, all right, let's hang out, man.
You are?
Yeah. Well, I knew he was my cousin. I mean, we grew up together, but I didn't know. It was kind of, I would say, little pre-social media, so like I didn't know he was going to school out there. He just kind of showed up at the show. But yeah,
it's one of the great things about being in a band, right? Is you get to go all around the world, and of course, once you kind of start to become a little known, even a bit famous, maybe suddenly everybody's like, "Oh my God, you're coming here! I got to come see you. Hey, come over to the house. We'll cook you a meal." And what people don't realize, as kind as that is, and thoughtful, it's harder to leave the ecosphere of the tour,
right,
and leave and then go to someone's house and have this. Oh, hey, you meet the kids and the grandkids, and here's Grandpa, and we're going to have a nice meal. And as warm and awesome as that is, it actually really pulls you off your game. You know what I mean? Because it's, as we were talking to Fred Koala about, you become a road family, and, when you're, you kind of do holidays together in the Holiday Inn or the Hilton, you know what I mean? You're doing Thanksgiving, you're doing Christmas, you're doing all your holidays together. And, so
we had stopped at a Denny's on Thanksgiving, just, rolling through, hey, we're going to stop at this Denny's, grab something to eat while we're on a travel day or something. And I ordered the Thanksgiving platter, and I remember Bobby just giving me shit. He's like, why are you getting that? I was like, it's Thanksgiving. Like, we're going to have a feast. I got the Thanksgiving special at Denny's that day.
My first road Thanksgiving was at the El Dorado in Sacramento, ironically, home of Tesla. Before I knew of Tesla, of course, but it was probably on the Killing, probably the Peace Cells tour, and just kind of, you're eating everything out of like, aluminum foil containers, brought in, and you're like, yeah, this isn't quite like it was back at home growing up. You're dipping all your stuff on all your fixings on there. And then, of course, there's someone sound checking in the back and, making loud noise. And that's when you kind of started, for me, that was when I was realizing, like, yeah, this is what this is going to be like now for a while. But I mean, to get used to this.
Those early Primer shows, which you were hoping for a food buyout. They would all give you like $5 or $10 to go find some food. And you could spend $3 on it, then you'd have $2 to buy something at the gas station later, just budget it out. And then you'd show up and there'd be this catering full of just all this delicious food. And you'd be so mad that they brought out like the lasagna or something. You're just could have used the $5 today.
Well, Cracker Barrel became one of those restaurants that, they would feed bands on the road. Bands would go, oh man, yeah, you can go to, Cracker Barrel. And if you say you're in a band, you can actually get free food. I'm like, oh shit. So I don't know if that was like a regional thing, because maybe are they from the South, and maybe there's, country bands touring through.
The home office of Cracker Barrel is in Nashville, so it's like that's probably a nice
music-friendly restaurant. Yeah.
Yeah. Talking to Brad that was a fun conversation, man, and it did take me back to in the late 90s, I did get a job at like a crew, like local crew kind of thing. And so, when Megadeth would come to town, they would call all the local guys in, and you'd go in there, and it was one of the honestly the more fun gigs I ever had, like jobs I've ever had, just because you work hard all day and then you see the finished product, and then you tear it all down and then they leave. It's crazy how organized a show like that can be. They're just big rigs of gear, just one after another. Boom, boom, boom. This goes there, that goes there. Stage is up. Boom, here's the show. And then they load it up and leave. And it's wild how quickly they can get
long day. 8 a.m. load into that's what I was always, that Trans Siberian Orchestra stuff. Man, they do these overdrive. I remember, some years they'd come like from El Paso to Phoenix. It's at least a good 6-7 hours, especially with big rigs and trucks and buses. So, by the time they're loading out at 2, 3 in the morning, and then they're pulling into town here by 10 a.m. They're loading all this shit up, and somehow it's all works for a 3 p.m. matinee show. You're like, how did you do this? It isn't even just about manpower. It's just there's just a lot of stuff here. You're like, how does this all fit together, and does this show go up? And it seemed crazy, to think about that. That's what we do, right? We go from one town to the next, and we set it up, we tear it down, set it up, tear it down. And I remember years ago, and maybe Cryptic Writings flying around, just going, God, isn't there a way like they can all come to us? Like we set up one time, and the guys were trying to do that. In fact, where we recorded the Rude Awakening DVD here in Phoenix was a place called the Web Theater. And I think we were the last show that played there. And now it's, I think, a University of Arizona campus. There's this whole college stuff down there. But that was the guy's vision was we'll have bands here. We'll do web broadcasts. I have a good friend of mine, Frank, who's now retired from Apple Computer. But how I got to know him in the 90s, he contacted me and said, hey, I'd love to do a web broadcast with Megadeth. And he goes, just a little background on me. He goes, first of all, this is my department. He then went on to run iTunes and all this, kind of forward-thinking stuff for Apple. And he goes, first of all, I'm the boss. I had the budget and I can do whatever I want. And I love Megadeth. And it just never happened. It didn't all come together, to make that happen. But, then of course, COVID happens. And then the reality is, okay, you're all at home now. How does that feel? And I was like, oh, shit, this sucks. We got to get back out on the road. Because that's the reality. What if that all went away? What would that be like? And it wasn't a lot of fun,
It was crazy how many venues tried to do that early on. There was a punk rock club in Nashville in like 98, 97 that tried, it was called IndieNet. It was going to be a venue that held a couple hundred kids, but they were also going to webcast everything in the 90s. That would have been awful, but but they were trying, I mean, that's similar to, Megadeth Arizona kind of being one of the first band websites ever, things like that. Just been
doing the Wolf every year. He's at a studio and we built it all out with Max Norman. Yeah. And then Ron, our manager, he said, hey, Capitol wants to come out. I want to talk about the setup of the record release. And yeah, that was one of the components, aside from just, shoot a video, get a song on the radio, go on tour. Those were kind of the check the boxes. But the other part was we've got this new technology called the World Wide Web, and it's like, well, we've heard of it, but what is it? They're like, well, we don't really know, but we think it's going to be big. So they built out that first website, which was huge. I mean, pages and pages, that's before you learned, like, yeah, you get a landing page and you better put it there because people lose interest quick,
Yeah.
But I remember when we did the release party for it, we did one in London, we did one in LA, and it was some big house up in the Hollywood Hills, and they had their web team there, a couple big Macintosh computers, and he said, here, do you want to chat? And then I'm like, okay, so you're like typing, like what we do now, texting and, chatting, right? Yeah. And it was some fan in Sweden or something. Oh my God, it's David Ellefson. I'm like, hey, what are you doing? Da, da, da. I'm like, what do you say? I mean, like, we're typing, it was all right. It was so weird. It's so foreign, and it's and that was, I guess I'm thankful that we were a band that was just like our manager with the T-shirt from the P-Cell stage, the world's state-of-the-art speed metal band. That we really were. We were the early adapters with all that stuff, and that was a pretty cool thing to be part of.
Yeah, like even the tour I was telling you I booked like right out of high school. I did it at like a friend of mine worked at Kinko's like at the 20, and he worked the overnight shift. So he let me just get online, which back then it cost, I don't know how much it was, but it wasn't cheap to just sit online at Kinko's. But I had another friend that had an AOL account. So I would go on under his screen name and you could search. I remember you could search cities and like interests. So I would search, Cleveland and Corn or something like that. And all these people would pop up and I would just message everybody. Hey, do you know the cool venue in town? Do you know the cool band in town? Blah, blah, blah. And I booked an entire like 2 weeks to a month tour. Wow. Just like that. But I just, on AOL, just hitting up people. And, I think I still talk to some of those people to this day, but it's funny. Like that was the technology at the time. It was either cold call a club or try to find a band to kind of trade shows with or something. So yeah, that's how we did that back then.
I mean, remember that I think it was first. I remember like the first AOL floppy disk, and then it became a CD-ROM, right? So I remember going like to Japan in particular, putting the CD, in the CD-ROM player of your computer, and then you plug in a phone line, right? And hopefully you had the connection. Okay, that works good, and then cool, right? And then up would come some numbers. You could click on this one to some local Tokyo number to get connected, and you're like, you didn't really know how much it was going to cost. Sometimes pennies, other times it was tens of dollars at a time. Just racking. You'd have a few $100 phone bill just going online for a minute. And I went to college like that. I did some University of Phoenix courses like that in the movies during the Cryptic Writings tour. I remember being in Nagoya, for instance, at the Hilton. Sitting there doing my homework, typing up my thing. I had and then I think I brought my printer with me. So I had a laptop, a printer, and I'd print it out. I'd go down to the front desk and I'd have them fax it to Tucson, which is just down the road from me here in Phoenix. And it probably cost $85 for the fax from Japan.
Right.
Just to get my homework in. Going, oh shit, my homework. We use the technology as best we can. The book tours, you go to college, right?
Well, what's funny now is bands can hustle a little bit better than they could back in the day. Because back when you guys are touring, the early days of Megadeth, it's not like you could run a T-shirt company out of the thing or a coffee company or anything else. You really couldn't do anything. But now, with your phone, you can run you can run Ellefson Coffee and everything going on tour and not just have to be, just strapped into, I can only make money playing a gig.
Right. And you can start things and say that is just because you said it is, right? Hey, I have a coffee company. Do you really? Well, apparently online it says I do. So it's like, not, it's to some degree, you're right. It's created sort of the low hanging fruit, right? That you can kind of grab at things that might be a great idea, but otherwise you'd have to have huge capital investment. You'd have to get a staff. You'd have to get an office. You'd have to have all these things. And then at that point, you're like, all right, I'm out.
Just all the overhead and everything else. You can do everything that you need just from your pocket now. So that's got to be good for these younger bands and keeping them going. And it's funny. I was thinking about another thing too, and we'll wrap up on this. But just money transferring, like money wiring. Like I remember, like now you can Venmo or PayPal or Cash App, all that stuff quickly. $100 or $200 or whatever you need to get in there. But I remember being almost stuck on tour. Like we'd ran out, like this is not Primer, but this is another band. Well, we had two vehicles coming from New Orleans to Nashville. And there's two major ways. You go up through Memphis and then go over, or you can kind of go up through Alabama. Right. And either of us went each direction. And the other guys had the band money. And like me and our singer had like the gear. And I remember like at one point we're in a Walmart parking lot, just like we had our CDs and we're just trying to sell CDs in the parking lot, to make some gas money. And then we ended up getting talking to our manager at the time, and he's like, "All right, I'll Western Union you some money." So we have
the Western Union.
So like at midnight, we're going to Memphis, downtown Memphis at midnight, to the bus station where there was a Western Union, and got a little bit of money and almost got home. And then, it was just one thing after another. But
it sounds like a reality TV show. Which band is going to make it to the speed on time? One goes east, one goes west. With all the TVs, the other one has the credit card. It's like the world's longest, fastest race or whatever that show is.
Yeah. It was totally one of those. Like, the what is it? The Amazing Race.
The Amazing Race. Yeah.
Yeah. I remember like we ended up rolling into some podunk town at like 7 a.m. and I'm like, these business suit guys are like getting ready for work. And I'm out there like, hey, you want to check out my metal band? And the guy gave me.
When people come to me now and they've got a CD, a lot of times be like, yeah, I'm not interested. And they're like, oh, look, we're just trying to pay our bills. You know what? I'll throw them $10 or whatever it is. You know what I mean? And because just for that very same reason, because you can tell if someone's kind of pulling a game on you, or if it's like, you know what, like we're sincere, like we're out here hustling. And it's like, you know what? I always respect the hustle, because look, I still do it. I don't do it to the day I die because I'm just passionate about it. I mean, it's like the reason.
Yeah. If I see somebody doing like, street musician, something like that, that's doing a good job, killing it, like playing guitar, like, hey, that takes stones to just walk out on the streets, start playing, and then and maybe they're at a low point in their life and they're like, fuck, and I gotta make some money today. I gotta go play, busking or whatever. And yeah, I'll always try to throw a couple of bucks into if I have cash, which is few and far between these days, but.
Or send them Bitcoin or something. But
there you go. Yeah, send them a Bitcoin. You're like one of those guys that traded a Bitcoin for like a pizza back 10 years straight. So, kind of for this history lesson with David, I kind of wanted to dive into your move from combat to capital. Kind of going from indie to major, and the one thing that I always find interesting with people is like that moment. It might even been on combat, but that moment where like, okay, this might be sustainable and my bank account is reflecting like, holy shit, like we made some serious money. Was there a moment that you checked the bank account and you're like, holy shit, like things are different today?
I think for me, that was probably going into Countdown to Extinction, because, we're a band who we've been very open about our lifestyle. And, leading that kind of a lifestyle, whatever money I did have, was, well, first of all, when you're a young man, you're building a business like any other, whether it's a shop or whatever, right? So whatever you make, you're investing back into the band over and over and over. In fact, I remember one time on So Far So Good So What, coming out of the hotel, looking under the parking lot, we were playing theaters, the occasional civic center. So we had production that would fit. And going, shit, there's 2 trucks, there's 2 buses, for all the gear. And that was pretty impressive because, to start in a van and, where we all start, a car, driving to go, wow, okay. But you realize, okay, that's why my guitar tech makes more money than me on this tour, right? Yeah, I think for the longest time, we were making $500 a night. Our guitar techs were all making $750. But, we also got to have the merchandising and all the rest of it that went with it. But the record, our names were on the record contract, right? So we're owners of the band. We went from a partnership, the first 3 albums, to finally, in Rust in Peace, we incorporated. But even then, only Dave and I were the owners of that corporation. And then we put up touring corporations, so things started to get more sophisticated as we got business managers and the legal team involved. Because all of a sudden you realize, the drummer throws a drumstick out, pokes some guy's eye out, everyone's sued, and you know what I mean? So now, the big boys are thinking ahead of all this kind of stuff. We're just out there rocking and playing and having a great time. But they're starting to think about that stuff. So, I think, Rust in Peace was not only a big musical reset for us to really just stake our claim, but also it was a rebuilding of the band, a rebuilding of the brand, everything about it, like, okay, we're sober, we're serious, like we're really, everything is intentional. And we were out on the road for 18 months, I mean, I remember coming off that tour, we started with debt and everything else, but, we had a great manager who was cutting good deals for us. And I remember coming off Clash of the Titans, and we were actually splitting up a merchandising check. I don't know, 40, 50 grand. I was like, whoa. And I remember I owed Dave some money he loaned me some money from his Metallica royalties to pay some debts. I had to pay off a manager or something, they would loan me some money, for debts back in 1988 or 89. And he was kind of one of my last, he's kind enough to flow me some dough, bro. You know what I mean? So I paid him back. And then I was kind of like, wow, my slate's clean, So as I went into the Countdown to Extinction tour, everything was even. We've been, Rust in Peace was the rebuild, you know what I mean? And that kind of got us flush. It got us even, so that everything after that was kind of the gravy money, So by Countdown to Extinction, all the years of the building, the reinvesting of our time, talents, resources, that everything that came in from Countdown and Euthanasia, that's when I moved out here, bought a house, and started to have, kind of a civilized home life, if you will, and, all that kind of stuff. So that was, that 92, 90, into that era, 91 into 92, that's kind of when it started to be like, okay, we're finally debt free and ready to go.
Nice. Yeah, I know, like, on like the Metallica making of the Black Album videos, stuff like that. They get, they always give Jason shit because he's frugal with his money, and at one point he's making sandwiches to take back to the hotel, and he's like, "You're like, dude, you just got paid millions." He's like, "Yeah, but I have plans for those millions, and it ain't on fucking sandwiches." So.
Well, and Jason, he was known to be frugal. And, and then one day, look, the rodeo ends, and he steps away from it, and he was ready. I remember having that same talk to Marty Friedman, outside the doors of the House of Blues in Los Angeles as he was, departing from the band during that week. And I said, dude, are you sure you're going to do this? He goes, I have to. I just have to. And I said, are you getting enough money? He goes, I'm going to have to. I'm going to have enough money. You know what I mean? It's like, I can't make, I have to go. I got to go. And I was like, I wish you all, my friend. And you could tell at that moment his soul needed to fly. You know what I mean? Be a free bird. Move on. And like, so that was bold, man. To just go, hey, I'm gonna have to make this work now. You know what I mean? Because it's just my time here is done. I got to move on. So we all have our reasons, and look. Then at the same time, you can be in the golden handcuffs. You can be in the cycle of earning and spending and earning and spending, and that person can be just as much a slave to the success too, and that,
yeah,
we've all seen that happen with bands. Maybe we've been in bands like that. Maybe we are that guy, and where, it's less about the creativity. It's more about, oh shit, we got to fill the coffers and keep the cycle going. And that's no different than any business. If you own a coffee shop or a donut shop or you're Microsoft or whoever, it's like, hey, we got bills. We got to, what's the next widget coming down the line to keep the lights on?
Yeah, and that must have been nice for Dave to kind of have that Metallica royalty coming in, to kind of help probably keep Megadeth going early on in the day.
In the beginning, yeah. I mean, I remember, one day a royalty check shows up out of nowhere. It was $5,000 or whatever. Fuck me, it could have been $1 million at that point. Wouldn't have been no. At least it was $1 million, or whatever it was. It's like, whoa, thank God that showed up. That was enough to just get us from here to there, and you're right. It's kind of like money falling out of heaven. But yeah, look, it's like that. Anybody knows, starting a band, that's what it is. It's hard to, to balance it all and work and pay the bills. And I remember, like, the Anthrax guys, I seem to remember they lived at home in the beginning. I was like, I was like, good for that. And then, I read these Van Halen books, right? Eddie lived at home until he married Valerie Bertinelli, which was on like the fourth album on like Women and Children First. I think reading Alex's book, he still lived at home after Eddie got married to Valerie and went off and did that. And then there, in his book, was always talking about her big time TV money, so as big as Van Halen was, he said the same thing. We just kept reinvesting and, as much as we were making money, but we just kept putting it back into a bigger light show. And, it's not like we took that money home. They just lived at home with their parents in their little house up in Altadena or Pasadena or whatever, So.
That's the thing. I mean, a lot of those guys never saw their homes. You know what I'm saying? Like, so you would go out on tour for 2 years at a time. It's almost pointless to have a house just sitting there rotting away. Like,
that's how I felt about it. In fact, you know what? It's like, I grew up on a farm. I mean, we were always fixing things and mowing the lawn. There's always stuff to do on it. And so to me, I was like, man, I kind of like living in an apartment. You know what I mean? It's like gas bills, $15, pay the light bill, good to go, lock it up and leave, and no worries, So, and not having all that expense. The same with a studio, it's like, I thought, oh, I'll move to Phoenix or Scottsdale. I'll get a house, I'll put a studio. And then I realized it's like, back then in those days before computer technology, man, if a studio would be $1 million easily to get invested into that, or at least several $100,000, a lot of money. And then by the time you go on tour for 2 years, you come home, it's like half the shit's outdated, so I never did do the investment into the studio thing. And, as much as I was kind of a gearhead and I enjoyed it. And then I realized is even now, I like just playing and let someone else deal with all the gadgetry, and patch bay, and, getting tone and all that kind of stuff. I find that if I'm doing both, I'm not as attentive to either one. And then sometimes I get musically frustrated. I got to fix a patch bay, or I got to dial a tone on something. So I like being able to go in and have someone else deal with that side of it.
And then also kind of going from Combat to Capitol, did you realize, was there a major difference in like the way both labels were ran? Like to where you could tell like, oh shit, like when we're putting this album out, this is going to be a big deal coming out?
Well, it's interesting when we, that was the thing with Metallica, Megadeth, Slayer, Anthrax, just for say, right? And then eventually Overkill, Nuclear Assault, Exodus, everybody, right? You start on the indie label, right? For us was Combat, Megaforce for Anthrax and Metallica, and Metal Blade for Slayer. And, so that's your beginning phase, right? But, and even the Slayer guys, I think they mostly lived at home too, So, is there a Metal Blade making records? But me and Dave were always independent. We lived on our own. So that's why we generally lived together, because share the costs, share the van, whatever, share the booze, all the stuff. Combat. I mean, our first record was $8,000. That was nothing. You couldn't even, drum rooms, in order to record drums. That's why we went up to Indigo Ranch up in Malibu, because we finally got the room cheap enough that we could afford to be there for a week. We got drums, bass, and guitars. And even, I guess, Dave sang a little bit there as well.
Which album is it, Indigo?
Yeah, up at Indigo Ranch. That's where we recorded the basics for Killing Is My Business. And yeah, and then we moved down to Crystal Sound Labs in Hollywood, down in Santa Monica and Gower. And that was where we finished the solos, some of the vocals, and we mixed. Because, just wasn't enough money. We had to live off that money as well as try to make an album.
So that Indigo Ranch era would have been before Ross Robinson had it.
Oh yeah.
Because that's where all the new metal ended up piling out of there years later.
Yeah. Did you ever work there?
I never went there, no. But I mean, I've obviously, the Corns and Slipknots and Limp Bizkits and
belonged to the Moody Blues. It was their studio. Okay. Yeah. And so the Enemy that had chalets, and there's living quarters. It was a big room. It had, you could have a private chef. I mean, it had the whole thing, right? So it had these big, 70s and 80s budgets, I guess, right? But by the time we got there in 84, when we were recording, it was already, the studio wasn't tired, but you could tell the glory days of the studio were kind of done. You know what I mean? And I mean, you had to drive an hour up a dirt road from Malibu to get there. So
when Joey Jordison told me that he had a mouse in his room, in his chalet, and he said it freaked him out at first, but he said by the end of the recording, he'd become friends with an old mouse.
You friends with him, mouse.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, no, that was so that's what that was. And then, then the second record, I remember we do the tour. We had gone with Megadeth and Slayer back to New York to play Lemoore, and we started doing some things. We played with Motorhead and Wendy Williams, like at Santa Monica Civic. We went down to San Diego, I think, played with Motorhead as well. So we started getting, a couple of bigger looks, kind of those sort of things. And then our agent Andy Summers sent us out on a little 3-4 week tour, January, February of '86. And we basically had written at that point, the Peace Cells album was mostly written. We wrote it at a rehearsal studio in LA. So we went out on the road and kind of played every song we knew, all of Killing and all of Peace Cells. And that was our pre-production tour. And by the time we came off of that, it was during that tour that Tim Carr from Capitol Records saw us play at Irving Plaza. Andy Summers invited Tim down. He saw us. We didn't know that he was interested until Michael Alago from Elektra Records, who's, been on the podcast, coming on the podcast here, had thrown the line in the water, of interest for Megadeth to go to the major labels. And then that's when Tim came in and made us an offer and ended up on Capitol Records. But before that, right before that, I remember sitting at Cantor's in Hollywood on Fairfax, which many a business deal, a showbiz deal has been done. I remember reading about Guns N' Roses going to Cantor's, to have band meetings and stuff. And that was where we met with Steve Sinclair from Combat and sat down, and he said, look, I'd like to hire Randy Burns. We'll escalate your budget now to $25,000 for the next record. And that's what became Peace Cells. And so we basically used Combat's money, recorded the record at the Music Grinder in Hollywood. Same thing, though. We used the Music Grinder to cut drums. We did bass, but then we moved to a much cheaper studio called Mad Dog Studios down in Venice, where Dave and Chris Poland did all the guitars and the vocals, and, and then Randy Burns mixed the record, and we turned it in, and then that's when the bidding war started with Michael Lago at Elektra and Tim Carr at Capitol, and then we moved up. And I don't know how much we got on that first record from Capitol, but it was a 7-album deal, which we did all 7 records. Even the record that became The World Needs a Hero, that was our 7th record for Capitol, and we'd actually recorded it with their money. And then they let us off the label. We went over to Rod Smallwood's Iron Maiden's manager and started Sanctuary Records. So we ended up taking the record over there. And part of the deal was Capitol would put out what became Capital Punishment, and they got to keep a couple of the best songs, Dread the Fugitive Mind and Kill the King. They got to keep those two. We had to, of course, repay the money to them. For which is part of the deal to let us off the label. But so kind of like how we went from Combat, they let us off the label, into Capitol. Then from Capitol, they let us off the label to go to Sanctuary.
Just from like the actual running of the label, and like, all right, well, we got this marketing team, we have this, the budget for this, the budget for that. I mean, it's got. Do you feel like it was much different coming from Combat to from Capitol?
No comparison. I mean, we were so frustrated with Combat because, they really didn't have any money. And I remember when we were on the Killing Is My Business tour and shows, we were out with Exciter, and it was their agents, and some of the shows weren't confirmed. They would cancel. We were literally sitting in Kansas City, and some girls bought us like a hibachi, and we were buying some beer, and we were literally making hamburgers in the parking lot, staying at the Motel 6. And I remember me and Dave called Combat and said, listen, we're dying out here. We need some money. And all they said was, you guys need to go home and get jobs. Fuck you. That fueled the fire. So that's why we were surprised they exercised the option for album number 2, which became Cells. And, thank God they did, because it allowed us to make a more competitive record. And then, that got us signed to the majors. Yeah, I mean, once you're at the majors, I mean, just walking in the doors of a major label, it's like, there it is, the Beatles, Tina Turner, I mean, Bob Seger. It's like, it feels like money, you know what I mean? And, there's gold and platinum records everywhere. Obviously, the Capitol Tower is iconic. The Capitol Studios were busy. Every floor of that label was a different, business affairs were at the top, the lawyers and the executives, the president's the top, and the business affairs, which are the lawyers. And then it's, probably rock radio, the A&R, then rock radio promotion and artwork and college radio. You know what I mean? So every floor, the building was shaped like a stack of records, right?
Yeah.
Right. And so every floor was a different department.
Well, let's wrap this one up, man. Just thanks to everybody for checking out. Hopefully you're enjoying the David Ellefson show. And man, this has been a blast to put together. So just hopefully everybody's enjoying what we're putting out.
Yeah, the debut episodes are up and running and out, and I'm rocking around the world, and you're rocking around the neighborhood, and we're doing what we're doing. So, yeah.
We are doing what we're doing. But yeah, we will talk to you guys soon. Thanks for checking it out.